Welcome to The Art of War Part 1. In this video and the videos following this one, we will be discussing the contents of Sun Tzu's famous book, The Art of War, and comparing them to lessons that we might be able to derive from it for our own role-playing games. This book has been written about 2,400 years ago, give or take. Sun Tzu was a Chinese general, advisor to a king, and in this book he talks about how to wage war, and maybe even more importantly, how not to wage war. And I think that a lot of the advice that he gives in this book to the general and to the ruler, to the sovereign, can be used for a game master and for players in the context of a role-playing game. Today we are starting with Chapter 1, Laying Plans. In this video series, we will not be analyzing every single sentence of The Art of War. That would be fairly long, very drawn-out video series, even though it's not such a thick book, but it's quite thick up here, if you know what I mean. Sun Tzu says, in this first chapter, that the art of war is governed by 5 important factors. These factors are constant, and they are to be taken into account in one's deliberation when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. In this video, we will be talking about those 5 factors and analyzing them in a bit more depth to see how we can use them in our own role-playing games. The 5 factors are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline. The moral law causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so that they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by any danger. This rule, this constant, is about trust. The people trust in their ruler. And in that same way, there has to be trust between the game master and the players of a gaming group. The players need to be able to trust in 2 things. Firstly, they need to trust that the game master is competent, which means that he has a decent-ish understanding of the rules, and that he will be able to adjudicate disputes between the rules and the game should they arise. Secondly, the players need to be confident into what I would call the benevolence of a game master, which basically means that the game master is not out to get the players. He's not playing against them, trying to destroy them, control them, and prove some sort of point that he's the boss or something like that, prove his own authority. No, the players need to trust and be able to trust into the fact that the game master is playing with them, is trying to create an experience that's fun for everyone involved, and is trying to basically make them into heroes. The second factor is heaven. Heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, time and seasons. This might sound a bit abstract, but heaven signifies the atmosphere, in my opinion, at the gaming table. For instance, is your gaming table standing close to a window? Is there direct sunlight falling into the room? In some games this might be a disaster. If you're playing Vampire the Masquerade or something similar, you don't want to have straight sunlight on your desk and on your players, because that kind of destroys a lot of the illusion. Is there a lot of background noise that might be distracting, or maybe for some reason might even deepen the illusion of the game itself? How warm or cold is it in your gaming room, basically? Is there music being played? All this environment, all this weather, so to speak, is something that you as a game master can set up in advance, and you can use that to your own benefit, to make your game as good as it can be, to improve the atmosphere, and the good atmosphere is one of the most important things in any game. Make your players feel comfortable, and sometimes actually make them feel uncomfortable. This might not be something for everyone, but for instance, when I ran one of my games, when it was a monster hunt in a snowy, basically a blizzard in the forest, I actually opened up the window, and it was winter outside for a bit, so that the room cooled down quite significantly, so everyone was sitting there with their jumpers and maybe nursing a cup of hot coffee or tea. And that certainly, while it wasn't necessarily comfortable for the players and for myself, set the atmosphere much better than it would have been set in a very warm or even hot room. The third constant factor we are talking about is earth. Earth comprises distances, great and small, danger and security, open ground and narrow passes, the chances of life and death. This is of course talking about the battleground, how to get to it, and how to use it to your advantage. Well, your battleground as a game master is your gaming table. There are some rules, some basic rules when it comes to where and how people are sitting that have been developed especially in connection to like job interviews and such. For instance, it is very bad form to force someone to sit with their backs towards the door, because people don't feel quite as comfortable. Sometimes you want that in a job interview, but at your gaming table, you generally do not want people to feel uncomfortable. So maybe where people are sitting, so to speak, where the table is in the room, where the chairs are facing, and what's behind them is something you want to think about. Seating arrangements are also quite important and also part of your battlefield. Maybe one player needs a lot of space because he has a lot of, say, dice or something. So maybe that player should be sitting a little further away from another player that also needs a lot of space. Maybe two players, because they're good friends and their characters are also good friends, like to whisper with one another a lot. In that case, those two players might want to sit next to each other. Or maybe two players have some issues with one another and might not want to sit next to each other because of that. Also, where are the snacks on the table? Can everyone sort of reach them, or is one person being shoved away to a corner of the table and kind of feeling left out because of that, because he's sort of a bit further away from the action and from the snacks than anyone else? These are all small things, but they can add up and make a session feel much more uncomfortable than it could be if you had set up the seating arrangements, the table and everything else in the best way possible. The fifth factor is the commander. The commander stands for the virtues of wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. All those are characteristics of a good game master. Wisdom, of course, you need to know your players, you need to be able to judge their responses and know what you can and cannot do at the table. Sincerity, be open when you talk about potential problems that might arise within the game. Speak to your players on an eye level. Treat them like adults, if they are adults, of course. And talk openly about things. Do not hide problems. Speak about them as soon as they arise. Benevolence was already mentioned. Play with the players, not against them. That doesn't mean never punish their player characters, never throw them into a difficult situation, never allow them to lose. No, by any means, it doesn't mean that. But in general, you should never try to crush your players and prove that you're the boss, that sort of thing. We all have heard stories about game masters doing that sort of stuff, and it never ends well. Courage is needed if you want to try out new things, push out of your comfort zone. Maybe you're a bit of a shy game master and you're not very comfortable with trying out voices or even speaking in character. Give yourself a push, have courage, try it out. Maybe you'll like it, maybe your player characters will like it. If they don't, and if you, after a session, feel completely dead because you did that, you can always take it back again. And finally, strictness. This might be a little controversial, but in my opinion, a game master is a figure of authority. You control the game. That doesn't mean be a control freak, but don't let yourself be pushed around. If players do crappy things, there have to be consequences. As I said, talk to people if there's problems, but if they do not change and if the problems persist, then show them the consequences. It is better to kick out one player out of the group than have the whole group suffer and maybe the whole role-playing game implode or just be destroyed by the behavior of one individual. These are difficult things that need to be done sometimes, sadly, as the game master, and you're the one that is most likely going to have to do them. The fifth factor is method and discipline. Method and discipline are to be understood as the marshalling of the army in its proper subdivisions, the graduation of rank amongst officers, the maintenance of roads by which supplies may reach the army, and the control of military expenditure. This, of course, is about logistics, the tools that an army needs. But there's also tools that a role-playing group needs. Firstly, a room to play in. Secondly, a table that we already talked about. Thirdly, character sheets, dice, pen and pencil, maybe certain computer programs, specific dice, if you're playing a game like, say, Fantasy Flight game Star Wars, snacks, and so on and so on. Think about what your group might need, what they will need, on what you can afford to leave out. Maybe you personally as a game master consider snacks to be a distraction in certain scenes. There's no rule against you saying, okay guys, let's leave the snacks aside for an hour or so while we're getting really deeply into this scene. Is alcohol permitted at your table or not? Is that a necessary ingredient? For some players it might be. Coffee, tea, cigarettes. All these things are the logistics of a gaming table and of a gaming group. Often, over time, everyone sort of understands what is needed and what is not needed for the game. But as a game master, you can be clever and think about these things beforehand, which might serve to lessen potential problems and weaken them or even stop them before they actually arise. Sun Tzu says that these 5 heads should be familiar to every general. He who knows them will be victorious. He who knows them not will fail. Well, similar things goes for a game master. Consider the things we talked about and you will succeed. Completely fail to consider them and your gaming group might very well fail. If you like this video and want to see more of it, don't forget to click the subscribe button, which will be appearing right up here, and also click the little bell button underneath the video where you can set the notifications and be notified whenever a new video from this channel, and especially in this YouTube series of videos, is released. Until then, True Mouse Games says thank you for watching. Good luck with your own games. Bye bye.